Ecoholics. Today what we are going to do is an interesting concept which is of environment, biodiversity. This concept is very interesting and also is very important from the perspective of various examinations. Like you may be giving a UGC NET examination where you would have a concept of biodiversity in your UGC NET paper 1, or you may also have different exams of graduation or post-graduation where you would learn environment, and there you can apply these concepts of biodiversity. So let's dive into the concept of biodiversity. Biodiversity is made up of some very interesting terms, which is variety and variability of life on Earth. So what exactly is biodiversity? When we talk about plethora of organisms, species of plants, animals, birds, parasites, humans, all of these species or all of these organisms are a part of biodiversity. So biodiversity is the organic and inorganic diversity that exists on our planet. Here we have two words, variety and variability, which basically means the variety of species or organisms that thrive on the planet, and variability means the differences in the similar or like species that exist on the planet. We are going to know more about the variety and variability concept in our future slides. So one of the very interesting or philosophical way of viewing biodiversity would be learning the knowledge that has been learned from how the earth has evolved. There are so many species on earth which have evolved. Take the example of Homo sapiens itself, human beings, which now are like this, but in the past, we have seen that there was a complete evolution of even the Homo sapiens. So exactly like that, there have been so many birds, animals which have evolved and are evolving according to the changes, the geocentric and the variety of changes that are occurring around us and around the planet. So according to that, upkeeping with those changes, the biodiversity keeps on representing variety and variability. Now, when we talk about biodiversity, we look into biodiversity from three specific angles: genetic diversity, species diversity, and ecosystem diversity. So firstly, we are going to look into the genetic diversity. When we talk about genetic diversity, it basically means the genes. So genetic diversity would be the total number of genetic characters in the genetic makeup of a species. This is basically a major definition that you can learn for any type of an examination. But when we understand this, what we actually mean is that if we talk about one species, let's say there are Homo sapiens, humans. Now there are different humans, and humans represent themselves as a genetic makeup of the previous the person who they are the offspring of. So the genetic characteristics are very important to measure the diversity, to measure the evolution of every species. You must have seen that there are n number of dogs. Okay, let's take up the example of dogs. Now there are so many variety of breeds of the species which is represented by the dog. Now in those breeds also there are n number of, let's say if we just talk about one breed, okay, we talk about German Shepherd. Now how are you going to distinguish one German Shepherd from the other? So what are these simple, small, minute differences which make one individual different from the other, even if they are from the same species and breed. Similarly, if we talk about humans as species, Homo sapiens, so the faces, the eyes, the features, the type of the body type, everything also is represented somewhere or the other into the genetic makeup. So genetic characteristics in the genetic makeup of a species would count for the genetic diversity. Now, genetic diversity is different, and there's also one concept which is genetic variability. Genetic variability is the tendency of the genetic characteristics to vary. So one individual who has a sibling from the same mother and father would definitely not be very different or not be very similar looking. So what are those characteristics that are making that particular individual different from their own sibling? Many times you would also find that when we talk about twins or triplets, even their characteristics may differ, their looks may differ, their different other features may differ because of the genetic variability. So the variation that you see in different offsprings from the same we can say mother and father, that also would definitely look into the genetic variability. So genetic diversity and genetic variability is the first part of your level of biodiversity. Then we have the next one, where we understand that how the human activities are affecting this genetic diversity. Now that we know what genetic diversity is, or the way in which we look into the genetic characteristics and genetic variability, how can the human activities or anthropogenic activities impact the genetic diversity? So there are a few points over here. When we talk about coastal zones or coastal areas, you must have seen these articles where we talk about marshy lands or the various marshes or the wetlands, which basically are nearer to major rivers or oceans. Now, they are naturally occurring plants and trees which are going to trap the carbon dioxide in the soil because of their marshiness, okay, because they are the plants which generate in muddy water. Now, if the anthropogenic activities, because of the human activities, if these marshy lands are cut down, you can imagine the amount of carbon dioxide which is going to be coming out of the trapped cells. Because of these plants, because of these trees, carbon dioxide is getting trapped, which is necessary for keeping up the balance between the environment. So these human activities may impact the diversity, genetic diversity in one of these senses. Then artificial selection. Normally when we look into harvesting, there are now so many kinds of harvesting. Let's say we talk about the aquaculture, which means you select some kind of fish from rivers or from oceans, and then you start to culture those fishes, or you start to harvest those fish artificially. Now that, or you must be also knowing the concept of broiler chicken, where the artificial process of making such type of chickens would also be coming under the artificial selection. Now this may impact somewhere or the other, because this is not a naturally occurring organic thing that is happening on the planet, and because of a human interference into this naturally occurring process, it may just cause a disbalance on the planet. So this also becomes a problem in genetic diversity. And then again, another example is the release of farmed fish in the wild. So basically releasing any, let's say, the farmed fish, or there are a certain type of fish that have been cultivated and cultured in a specific area. Now they are put in a pond or a lake or a river or any wild zone where they do not belong to now. So again, there will be a problem in the already existing in the already existing ecosystem with the already existing fishes and these fish which are coming from the farms. Again, a problem in the genetic diversity may occur. The offsprings may not be very nurtured, and the problem of reproduction may also occur. So basically, when we talk about such human interference, we basically are trying to project that human interference and anthropogenic activities may harm the genetic diversity or may hamper the organic process by which the earth moves, the planet moves. So this may lead to a major disaster that may occur later. So that is how we talk about the impact. Then the next type of the level of biodiversity is species diversity. When we talk about species diversity, it is the number of different species which are present in the ecosystem and the relative abundance of each of these species in the ecosystem. So here we talk about the species perspective of biodiversity. Now here we have two very important terms that may occur again in your examinations, which is species richness and species evenness. Now these are two different things in the species diversity itself. When we talk about species richness, it is the number of different species which are present in any type of an ecosystem. So let's say you take an ecosystem of a forest. In that particular forest, you take a specific type of you take different types of species which are present in that particular forest. So there can be a number of species of grass, a number of species of tree, a number of species of plants, a number of species of reptiles, a number of species of birds, and so on and so forth. So here in the species richness, what we are talking about is a specific area in which we are finding a number of species, different species. And then the second one is species evenness. Species evenness is the relative abundance of individual species, individuals of each of the species. So let's say if we were talking about that forest, okay, so in this forest now, if we talk about the species richness, then species richness, we talk about different grass and different trees, okay, different types of trees. Then there would be a variety or species of animals and a variety of birds and different types of other species of reptiles, so on and so forth. However, if we talk about species evenness, then technically we are talking about a single species and the abundance of that species, the individual number of the individual units of that particular species. So if I just talk about grass in that forest, so I would like to know how much unit or what is the individual units of that grass. If I am talking about tigers, then I would like to know how many number of tigers are there present in the particular species of what tigers are in that particular forest. So that represents species evenness. Species evenness is very, very important for any type of biodiversity balance, because if individual in that particular area, individual units of a species are lesser, it may just endanger them, and then it may occur that gradually a particular kind of a species will just be lost from the planet. Now this becomes very severe because we know that because of the interlinkages, the food chains and food webs that we have learned from the very basics, because of those things, we are interdependent. We are interdependent on each other. Every species is dependent on some or the other species. So because of that, if even one species is lost from the planet, it may hamper the food chains and food webs and codependency of many other such species. So this is why we learn about species richness and species evenness both, right? Then we go ahead and talk about the importance of the species diversity. Okay, more diverse ecosystem would tend to be more productive, because the more number of species are there, the codependency, interdependency would be balanced. Okay, the ecosystem with a great variety of producer species will produce large amount of biomass. We all understand about the pyramid of energy, where there are producers, consumers, autotrophs, heterotrophs. This is something which is very basic, and so according to these pyramids of energy, we require that if a certain individual number of organisms are in the base pyramid, their number should always be high, and then on it should gradually decrease. If this does not happen, just imagine a phase where tigers, let's say, are in a limited number. You can always count the number of tigers, but you cannot count the number of butterflies or the number of, let's say, grasshoppers, because each of these species have individual characteristic, have individual food mechanism, and also fall under different categories. One is a carnivore, the other is a herbivore. So which is why there has to be a perfect balance between herbivore, carnivores, omnivores, and all of these species, so that we have a specific energy pyramid that is balanced in the ecosystem. Then greater species richness and productivity would make the ecosystem more sustainable and stable, because there will be greater amount of species richness. So that is going to definitely make the whole ecosystem stable, and which is why in species rich communities, each species can use a different proportion of resources. So if a carnivore is dependent on a specific type of a herbivore, now imagine that herbivore is gone from the planet. Now the carnivore is going to search for a different type of a species, probably another carnivore, and that may create a disbalance on the whole earth. So which is why we require to understand the importance of species diversity. And the last one is the ecosystem diversity. Now when we talk about the ecosystem diversity, it basically represents the different type of ecosystems, special zones for thriving of different species, different organisms. It is a collaboration of biotic and abiotic organisms, and where we understand the ecosystem diversity into two major forms: aquatic ecosystem, which means all related to water, and terrestrial ecosystem, which means all related to the land. Okay, so this is water ecosystem, and this is land ecosystem. Okay, aquatic ecosystem would have two types: freshwater and marine, which will basically look into the sea ecosystems. And then of course we have on terrestrial, we have forest ecosystem, grasslands, mountains, and deserts. So the ecosystem diversity we will learn in another such type of lecture, where we will learn the whole types of ecosystems in full length. right? So that ecosystem diversity again is the third and a very important level of biodiversity. And finally, when we talk about so much related to biodiversity and ecosystems, we must understand the major issues related to the ecosystem diversity. If there are problems, because we are talking about ecosystems where individual species live. For example, there are some species which are only meant to live in a forest. There are some species which are only meant or built to live in grasslands, or there are some which are only built to live in a very snowy region where 24/7 there is always going to be a cold desert type of a climate. So for each of such individuals, if the ecosystem is not well maintained, it can lead to habitat loss. Then it can also lead to exploitation. Over-exploitation in reference to over-excavation or exploitation of resources from a specific type of an ecosystem, that may lead to over-exploitation. Poaching of wildlife, which is again against the rules, against various acts, illegal, but still happens in many areas. Pollution and climate change. The problem of pollution and climate change will occur the most where the ecosystem is not balanced. If the ecosystem is balanced, is filled with trees and forests and grasslands and deserts, and all species are well maintained, then the pollution and climate change will not heavily occur in those regions because the ecosystem will defend itself. However, pollution, climate change is something that is also anthropogenic, and human activities have also led to a lot of such problems, because of which climate change will occur and will demonstrate its negative impact on not just one ecosystem but almost all ecosystems. Then underlying social conditions. There are so many different ecosystems which still are not economically sustainable. The lives are not really earning their livelihoods very efficiently, because of which there's negligence of a lot of livelihoods, not just of human beings but also of different other species. So the social conditions would demonstrate some ecosystems which have not wherein the humans are living, or there is a major human population which is present in a certain ecosystem. However, there are no good facilities. For example, if you look into the hilly regions or the hilly areas, mountainous regions where population is lesser, but still they still reside there because they may have their livelihood over there, but because of no progress or no such development that exists at those areas, there will always be a poor social condition and progress in such areas. And then the last issue in the ecosystem diversity is about the alien invasion species. Now there are many such species, let's say of grass, of weed, or of such type of fish that live or that may develop their mutants, and they are gradually evolving. Now research might not have happened of such species, and what will occur if such species happen to be or happen to exist on the ecosystem, and what will be the impact of their living on other such species. So alien invasion species will be also such different type of species of plants, of animals, of bacteria, of other parasites, of other type of organisms which may evolve gradually because of the evolution process, and may either hamper the ecosystem or they may just create some nuisance in the ecosystem. So to find out that as well, there can be various researches that may happen. So that becomes the various issues underlying the ecosystem diversity. So today we learnt about the concept of biodiversity and the three important levels of biodiversity: the genetic biodiversity, species biodiversity, and the ecosystem biodiversity. So we will keep on explaining such interesting concepts on various modules on various subjects. So keep liking and sharing our videos and keep subscribing Ecoholics. Thank you.